right, so it is 1 o'clock, so we will get started. I know other people are jumping on, and a lot are on the phone already. So I think everybody on the call knows me. My name's Dan Luigs, and I'm definitely not the one we're here to see. So I'm so grateful that Bob Burg is with us today, and Bob jumped on a couple minutes early, so we've been chit-chatting and going back and forth. Bob is truly legendary. Have you sold 1 million books for Go Giver yet? Last time I checked, it was 950,000. So I'd love to see
Yeah,
an counter. Is it?
it's up to it's somewhere between 975,000 and 980,000 with the Go Giver itself. With the others in the series, it's well over 1 million, but with the original one, it's inching closer.
Well, we'll do our small part to help
Thank you.
get closer to 1 million. We had a call yesterday, and somebody was on, and they said, "I'm so glad that you set this up. It got me to read the book, and it's life changing." And that was yesterday. So
Thank you.
she says, "I never finish a book, but I finished that book like that." So
I think that's more credit to my co-author, who's a great writer. I'm much more of a how-to, step 1, step 2, step 3. So I'm actually rather boring when you get to know me, but John's just a great writer.
So just incredible book. I love it. The whole series is fantastic. And then Bob also wrote another book called Endless Referrals. And around the time in my life where I realized I needed to step up and start having a little bit more confidence, doing more public speaking, I embraced a philosophy where you teach others some skill sets, whatever it is that they might need to learn. And so, Bob, I grabbed a hold of Endless Referrals when I was doing a kind of a referral class, and I sent out an invite to a few people, and some of them were pretty high producers in the St. Louis area in the mortgage and real estate business. And I got an instant response from one of the highest producing realtors in St. Louis. And I said, I've got to back up. I got to change this class totally, because I did not have this class designed at a graduate level course. This was a much more. So I ran and grabbed Endless Referrals. I'm like, this must be good. It's highly rated. Everybody's talking about it. I got to devour this thing and get it ready to put into action. So thank you. You helped save the class and make it much, much better. So years ago, I thought, man, one day it'd be so cool to be able to talk to Bob Burg. And we've had some exchanges in the past, and you've been so gracious, and all the things that I've read about your thinking strategies and everything, you've been congruent with, you've been in alignment with, and you do what you tell other people to do. And I just love that about you. And I don't know any which way to appreciate you more. I certainly didn't want to just read your bio and say that, is who he is. Like,
no, that was very kind of what you just said. Thank you.
You're welcome. Absolutely. So before we get going, Michael Burke is with Live Bold Coaching, and he's kind of going to monitor the chat room and that type thing, and monitor the microphones and all that. So thank you, Michael, for volunteering to help out with that. Appreciate it a bunch.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
We just talked about congruent, Bob, and you want to talk a little bit about the Go Giver and how that not only works in business, but also at home?
Well, the basic premise of the Go Giver is really nothing more than that, shifting your focus. And that's really the key, shifting your focus from getting to giving. And when we say giving in this context, we simply mean constantly and consistently providing immense value to others, understanding that not only is that a more pleasant way of conducting business, it's actually the most financially profitable way as well. Not for any woo-woo, way out there, magical, mystical type of reasons. It really is logical. It makes concrete sense when you think about it, because when you're that person, and here we're talking in the business context, we'll relate it to personal relationships in a bit, but when you're that salesperson, that entrepreneur who can take your focus off yourself and instead just focus on helping that other person, helping solve their challenges, helping them, get what they're looking to accomplish, helping them attain happiness or bring them closer to happiness, however they would define that. When you do that, people feel good about you. It's very natural. It's human nature, and people want to get to know you, and they like you, and they trust you, and they want to be in relationship with you and buy from you if that's appropriate in terms of if there's a match between what they want and what you have. But they definitely want to talk you up to others. They want to be your personal walking ambassador. So it makes that kind of concrete sense. I often, when I used to speak at sales conferences, I'd often begin by saying, nobody's going to buy from you because you have a quota to meet, right? They're not going to buy from you because you need the money or you have a mortgage payment or even because you're a really nice person. They're going to buy from you because they believe that they'll be better off by doing so than by not doing so. And when you think about it, in the free market based environment where most of us operate, and when I say free market, I simply mean no one is forced to do business with anyone else. People do so by their own volition. In that type of environment, that's the only reason why anyone should buy from you or from me or from anyone else, because they believe they'll benefit, right? That it's a good choice for them. And that's why that's such good news for that entrepreneur, for that salesperson who really can just, take their focus off themselves and look to bring immense value to others. It's also why John David Mann and I say that money is simply an echo of value, right? It's the thunder to value's lightning, if you will. Which means nothing more than that the value, the focus on bringing that value to others, that must come first. The money you receive is a very natural result of the value you've provided. Now, that's in the business sense. But, success can be measured, as we all know, in many different areas. There's financial, but there's also physical, spiritual, mental, emotional, social, relational, what have you. And when you think about any of those relationships, the more you give to it first, the more your focus is on bringing value to that particular aspect or relationship, the more it just makes sense that you are going to receive the most.
Yeah, absolutely. I heard money's a certificate of appreciation. So.
Yeah, Rabbi Daniel Lapin wrote that in his book, I think it's Thou Shalt Prosper. And I love that definition. Because really that, when you think about it, that's exactly what it is. Certainly the money you receive, whether it's a check or whether it's a dollar bill or $100 bill or whether it's $1,000, those aren't real, right? We actually don't have real money anymore since we're not on a gold, economy or a gold standard. But those dollars or checks, those are certificates, right? And it's a certificate of appreciation. Now they can also be put directly into our bank accounts, and that's another form. But yes, Rabbi Lapin was absolutely right. It's a certificate of appreciation. It's a way of saying thank you. You brought value into my life, which I willingly and voluntarily exchanged something for.
So your second law, the law of compensation, that's something I think a lot of people have trouble with understanding. That it's okay to make lots of money. They have a economic thermostat where they get comfortable at certain levels. Have you got any tips, advice? Have you seen different people get stuck at certain levels and only willing to accept so much?
Yeah, sure. And that has a lot to do with, even the fifth law, the law of receptivity. When, we say the key to effective giving is to stay open to receiving, which means what? That you breathe out, but you also have to breathe in. Just try doing one without the other. It just doesn't work, right? And that's not how life works. Life is a giving and receiving. We breathe out carbon dioxide. We breathe in oxygen. The tide rolls out, comes back in. We breathe out, which is value, giving, right? Giving value. We breathe in, which is receiving. what happens is, and I think the reason for that economic thermostat in many ways is because of the messages we receive from the world around us. We do not receive mixed messages from the world about money. We receive very negative messages from the world about money. Okay. And we see it all the time. Look at how so many of the, what we heard over those last few months in terms of in the political arena about how billionaires should be banned, millionaires should be banned. Why? Let's question our premises, and ask why. And yet, how many people just accepted that, right? The other day, last week, I think, some people in front of Jeff Bezos's home in Virginia, in front of his home, actually put up a guillotine, which, remember, in France during the Revolution was to cut off the heads of
Yes.
the president. So, but here's the interesting thing. I'm assuming that in order to get those parts for the guillotine, they had to order them from Amazon.com, which says to me Bezos must be providing them some value that they willingly paid for. So, most people, unfortunately, and, they don't understand the difference between free market capitalism, which is the greatest economic system in that by the very nature of the thing, it grows for everyone. Okay. And cronyism, which is where there are special rules, laws, and regulations that the lobbyists, they get that, if someone makes $1 billion because of that, well, by all means, they shouldn't have that money. They should be in jail, as should the politicians who were bought. Okay. But that's not how it usually is. Okay. Most people who make a lot of money did it through providing immense value to the lives of many, many people. And I guarantee all of us, or let's say none of us, have connections, and hopefully wouldn't even want these connections, where we buy special interests or we buy special rules and regulations that keeps out the competition and gives that right and forces people to do business with us. No, people only do business with us because they believe it's going to be of great value to do so. Because of that, we must know that we have earned the right, not the entitlement, but the right to receive. But we know the giving has to come first, because that's how. So what we like to say when it comes to the law of receptivity is understanding that giving and receiving, just again, despite the messages we get from the marketplace, or not from the market, just from the world around us, which is sort of a marketplace, but a different one than but that despite the messages we get, giving and receiving are not opposite concepts. So it's not, are you a giver or a receiver? It's an and. It's, you're a giver and a receiver. But we know the giving comes first. You don't go up to a fireplace and say, first give me some heat and some fire, and then I'll throw on some logs and a newspaper and light a match. That's not how the world works. You don't go to a bank and say, I want to open up an account, but first I want you to give me an interest payment. It doesn't work that way. We have to deposit first. And those are the laws of life, and that works. So that thermostat is set at a certain receptivity point, because the world around us has basically told us that it's evil to make a lot of money. My friend Randy Gage, who does a great vignette on movies, and talks about how if you watch most major selling movies, there are two types of characters that are portrayed. There are the poor people, right, who are good, and they're happy, and they're honest, and they're nice, but they're always being stepped on, stepped over, stepped around, pushed down, pushed around by who? The evil rich people, right? He brings up that in the first Spider-Man movie, if any of you remember this, Peter Parker was talking with his Uncle Ben about, why they don't have money, and about people who have money. And Uncle Ben said, now get this. This is very important. Uncle Ben said, Peter, we may not be rich, but at least we're honest. Ugh, what a terrible message for a young kid to hear. And it's not like they just get this once. This is pounded home through media, through teachers and schools sometimes, unfortunately. We all see this, and through parents a lot of times, and through, just all over the place. And this can really get into a person's unconscious. And that's the insidious part. It's not that anyone's thinking, oh, I don't want to make a lot of money. No, by and large, it's, no, I'd like to. But what happens is you get to the point where you have a lot of it about to come in because you've placed so much value in the world. But those old tapes going, well, but if I have a lot of money, doesn't that mean I'm not honest? Now, you don't remember Uncle Ben saying that to Peter, but it's a message you've gotten so often. Will people like me less? Does it mean I did something wrong? I have a great book for you to get. If you're someone who has an issue, and there's lots of great books on this, but there's one that was written in 1960 by Dr. Maxwell Maltz called Psycho-Cybernetics. Deb, you look like you may have read that book. Had you? I saw a couple people have. Okay,
oh, yeah.
David, you have as well. Brian, you have as well. And so, while it's not specifically about that, although there is an incident he talks about in there about the insurance guy who couldn't go past a certain amount, and they ended up discovering it was because in his family it was disrespectful to make more than his father did, and his father never made more than that amount of money. Once they uncovered that, and once he understood, he was able to. Okay, but it's really about how our mind works and how we will never go higher than our belief systems in any area. So we have to be aware of this. But there's many great books out there on and many great teachers out there on receptivity. In the book we cover a little bit of it, but it's just a surface, amount. But
did you ever run into that in your own life?
In mine?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of the times before I kind of became conscious of it, it wasn't for the same reason in Psycho-Cybernetics. In my family, my parents wanted nothing more than for the kids to do better than the parents.
Right,
so that
right.
wasn't something. But in my own life, I mean, I think I felt worthiness issues or lack of worthiness issues that kept me from attaining as much as I could and so forth. I don't think I ever did see being wealthy as a sign of being bad or evil. That wasn't something I ever bought into because it never made sense to me. Okay. But there were internal issues I had in terms of my own worthiness that I had to get past.
Can you share any one little thing that you did or one big thing you did to get past that?
It started with awareness. That was just the big thing. And being aware of an issue doesn't mean you necessarily have cured the issue. It's usually just a first step to move on to do it. In my case, it was being aware of it is what brought it out enough so that then I could start checking my premises when I found myself resisting something good or not, taking action on something when I knew it was the right thing to do. And I started to ask myself, why? Why am I not? What's holding me back from this? Is there something that I don't feel? You know what I'm saying? So with me,
yes.
The understanding itself sort of opened a floodgate for me.
Yes. Yeah. Years ago, I absolutely had that worthiness issue, and there's no way I'm worthy to talk to Bob Burg today.
Oh, you're right.
And the awareness, yes. And then second thing, I started writing affirmations, and I wrote, I am worthy every day for a while until I realized that I am worthy.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that was a big thing. So can you talk a little bit about like the world as it was a year ago? Things are different today. We used to have live in-person meetings. We used to have a mastermind St. Louis here in St. Louis. A couple hundred people would come once a month. And so the physical world and digital, in your book, Endless Referrals, you've got networking parallels, the cyber world and the real world. Can you talk about how to take some of these go-giver principles, the 5 laws, and impart them in today's world? By the way, and we've got a whole lot of realtors on this one. So if there's a way specifically maybe dialed towards realtors, we got people from all over the country. So realtors, thank you for being on. You guys are fantastic. Amazing that the job that you guys all do. So Sorry to interrupt the question, Bob, but
No, that's okay. And I think with real estate, because I do have quite a few real estate company clients, it was very difficult because obviously there was no business really taking place for quite a while. When people can't really leave their homes, it's difficult to sell or buy a home. So what I found a lot of realtors did was they found ways to bring value to their prospects, their customers, their clients, in such a way that they positioned themselves as the go-to person once things got back to, whether you want to call it normal or new normal or whatever the nomenclature is for that. But and so that's what they did. So they kept in touch with people. They let them know they were thinking of them. They found ways to, do things. For example, knowing that people had to homeschool their kids. They would have someone who was like an expert on a fun way of teaching history come on, and they'd hire that person to do a Zoom call that the parents could watch with their kids or could put their kids in front of, right? Or they could, knowing different interests that their customers, clients, prospects had, they would send them information that related to them. In other words, they kept themselves visible and they kept themselves caring for that person, understanding that nothing was going to sell. I mean, we're not talking magic. If you can't leave the home, nothing's going to sell. But to set it up so that when it was ready to happen, they would be that person who, wow, that's the person who was thinking of me. That's the person who's, who cares. That's the go-to person.
that's a great answer. And that's some really good specifics too. The people that I found that had some success during that time did exactly that. They reached out, they cared, they found the way to connect or help solve a problem that was outside of real estate, and the real estate business came. And the ones that went juggernaut straight business had a hard time, and they said, what's going on here? My business model isn't working. It used to work, and
Right.
got a few phone calls during that time. So that's a fantastic answer there. So have you got any stories about, you've had so many conferences and companies you work for. Have you got any stories that are some of your favorites, just about transformation somebody's had or a company's had to switch from thoughts they had to more go-giver principles?
Well, the early adopters of the go-giver were not really the people who needed to read it. It was the people who'd been doing these things throughout their careers and had built their, and we know this because John and I both received lots of emails from, top CEOs and leaders and producers and sales who said, this is how, what you guys talked about in the book is how I've built my business. And I've tried to tell other people that, and they didn't believe me. Right. And so they liked the idea that John and I just sort of codified in book form what they had done and tried to teach. So a lot of them used our book as a third party type of thing. You know how it is sometimes. You tell the people you lead something and they go, oh, yeah, right. But, published author, right. What do we know? Anything more than anybody else? And so, but so that was really, so what we always enjoyed hearing was that these principles weren't new, which we knew that anyway. Of course, these principles have been around for, Jim Rohn used to say, if you remember Jim Rohn, he used to say, beware the person who comes promising new fundamentals, right? And so, no, these principles have been used since time immemorial. Certainly, so long as there have ever been markets, successful people used all five of these laws. The laws of value, compensation, influence, authenticity, and receptivity. Now, many of them did it intuitively. They didn't know that's what they were necessarily doing, and they wouldn't have used those words, but that's what they were doing. Others learned and studied and so forth. John and I just simply put these principles into words and story. But I also loved hearing stories. I remember an email from a guy in Pittsburgh who was a roofer, and this was during the 2008 downturn. And he explained that he had had a successful business, but once the downturn hit, his business just went way downhill. And so did all the other roofers in town. And he started doing what they all did, tried to pull back on the value he was offering and tried to get the most for the least. And he read the book and he said, no, I'm doing it backwards. And he started finding more ways to provide value. That didn't mean he spent more money, didn't have to, but he found ways to figure out who was eligible for insurance easier and help them work through it because they wouldn't have known. So, in other words, he found ways to bring value that other people weren't doing. And his business, I always want to say went through the roof, but that wouldn't even be a good pun. But it went very, very well. And he ended up making more money than he was. So those are the kind of stories we love, just, hearing people relate those.
So it was a little unusual as I was surveying people, asking questions of what they might want to hear from you about. A question that kept coming up, and this one kind of shocked me, but they said, ask Bob what his failures are. Has he ever failed at anything? And have you got a story about your own personal?
Oh, well, I've had many more failures than I've had successes. I can't really think of too many successful people who wouldn't, say that. That doesn't mean I'm glad that I had them or that I enjoyed going through them. They all added to what I eventually was able to accomplish. But I'm not one of these people who says, oh yeah, welcome the failures. Oh, it's great because it's good. No, the failures stink. Who enjoys that? Now, afterwards, it tends to turn out that it was great because it did lead to something better. But at the time, it doesn't. And I think saying that that you're glad for the failure, for most of us would be kind of inauthentic. But sure, I've had many of them. I'll tell you, a big failure of mine was in the late 90s. I'd been speaking for about 7 or 8 years, and I've built up a very successful speaking business. But that's kind of when the internet really started to grab hold, if you'll recall. And I didn't want it to. Right? I'm not a techie by nature. I also don't like change, which again is very politically incorrect to say in the personal development field where we're supposed to love change and change is great. I hate change. I like learning something, getting really good at it, and then just repeating the process. But whether I like it or not isn't the issue. Okay. So I'm also not someone who actually foresees things really well. I can't tell you how many times I said this internet thing will never take off. So it just goes to show we can be good in one area, but it doesn't mean we, are necessarily good in others. And so I kind of refused. I kind of got a little cocky and said, I've got a good clientele. They'll stick with me. But because of certain things that happened, that will do the ellipses, yada, 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 I ended up losing some very key clients, and I had to really start rebuilding my business. So that was a painful, I almost don't want to say lesson, or it was a lesson, but it's not one that I learned as much as I relearned, because I'd done similar things in the past. And that was finally where I said, you know what, Burg, you don't have to like change. You just have to be willing to change if you want the results that you like.
Yeah, so a meeting like this used to make me incredibly uncomfortable. And I realized in order to thrive in today's world, I had to just embrace this new technology. Have you got any examples of people you've talked to or things you've done? I've seen a few things you've done of transitioning into this less than meeting people in person type world.
Things I've done in terms of what, the technology, or in terms of
I guess kind of embracing the phone or technology, or internet technology, meeting people on Zoom and places like that.
Yeah, now it's just you either do or you get really left behind. It's no longer really even an option. Now I'm very fortunate because my business partner Kathy Tajanel is just brilliant when it comes to technology. Well, she's brilliant in actually many areas, but technology is a real strong point for her. So she has really made it so that I can really stay within my strength zone. and do the things I do best while she handles the technology. Now, I know enough about it now that I'm not going to get left behind again in business, but she's the one that really makes that happen. So to me, something like this is basically the same as being in person, because we're talking to each other, we're relating, and if it was one-on-one, I'd be listening obviously a lot more than I'm talking, but obviously I'm here for the specific reason of being asked questions. So, but it always goes back to the same question: is what I'm about to say or do or tweet or post or what have you, is it going to add value to the other person? Is it going to add value to the marketplace? And what is a marketplace but a group of individuals, right? So
Yes.
Whether we're talking to one person or we're talking to a group of people or we're tweeting or posting or linking or on the phone, hey, I built my speaking business first on the phone. I mean, that's technology, and so it's really, to say you have to be in person one-on-one. Hey, it's great when you can be. And I don't think it's an either or. I think it's an and, when we can be in person, all the better. But we used the phone for, and before that it was, actually handwritten, letters. So, people have found ways to communicate. Technology, I think, makes it easier actually to be able to meet people we may never have been able to reach, and to be able to build and cultivate that know, like, and trust relationship. But again, it all goes back to moving from that I focus or me focus to that other focus.
Yes, absolutely. That is, and I found you can do that same thing digitally. So that's kind of one of the reasons why we're here today, is a way to give back and help others. So appreciate you doing that. We've got a few people here that, just before we transition to that, you have an online course. You've got 4 free modules that people can sign up for that I've recently gone through, and they're fantastic.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, that one's selling the Go Giver Way. And that's 4 videos. It's a mini course.
Yes.
And then at the end of it, it leads into the full course, which is Endless Referrals, the Go Giver Way, where I sort of take the 2 big areas, the Endless Referrals and the Go Giver Way. And it's a pretty intense course. But yeah, again, it's all video, all online and so forth. So we're having a lot of fun with it.
And go to bobburg.com.
Yeah, Burg.com is fine.
Burg.com.
And right there should either be a pop-up, or you can find it right on the site that just says free mini course, the Go Giver Way, or you can go to, in fact, I'll type this in and see if it works. sellingthegogiverway.com. Let's see if it pops up or not. Nope, it didn't. But you can check. And then the other one is, and I'll see if this does it. The actual course is at endlessreferrals.com, and that one didn't either. So,
okay. Well, yeah, we can do a search and find it, and I'll share it with everybody as well. We got a few people here that's super excited to interact with you and ask questions. I know Jim Adolphson. Jim's got a company called Adonis. They do computer recycling for people.
Awesome.
I use the improper terminology, but that's okay. Jim, if you want to unmute yourself.
Yes, thank you, Dan. I appreciate you giving me this opportunity. And Bob, man, what a pleasure, like I was telling you before, to share your book with my 15-year-old and have him understand how and why I do business the way I do business, and with it resonating with him. My question today is going to revolve around them young people. In this pandemic that we're in, you have virtual school, you have sports teams that can't participate, and these kids are isolated. You see the level of depression and suicide going through the roof in that age bracket. What advice would you give to those young people in this time? Because it's so important to them that they develop these relationships, they're finding their identity and figuring out who they are and helping each other through that. What advice would you give them to help each other out when they're so separated from each other right now?
Jim, it's so tough because I don't think there's any magic bullet at all. But I will say this, that to the degree that you can get them taking their focus off themselves and on who they can help or provide value to, or say a kind word to, or do some kind of project where they're, raising money for some cause, something that helps them lose themselves a little bit and be part of something bigger. Because it's so difficult during this time for people to, it's hard to get our minds off of ourselves, boredom. And even though, today you think, kids have more stuff to do that they can do online. And you think about what it must have been like in 98 or 1918 or 1919 when they had the Spanish flu and people had to isolate and they had nothing to do other than read if that's what, which to me would be fine. But I mean, to most people and especially kids, that's not something. Now they have all these things. However, everything's relative. And, they're used to having all their toys and games and all these things, and also being able to go to school and be able to get out and so forth. So I think it really comes down to, if there's one thing, and again, I don't think there is just one thing, but one thing would be to, in some way, help them to engage in something that's outwardly focused.
Great point.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I really appreciate your time. I'm going to mute myself and continue to listen. Dan, thanks again, buddy.
Jim, thank you again.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. Michael Burke with Live Bold Coaching. Thank you for moderating, and take her away.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. Bob, what's like the first small step someone can take to go from this I focused to other focused?
So I think one big part is understanding why it's in that person's best interest to be other focused. And let me explain what I mean. There are times people will ask, okay, Bob, I know this, this go-giver thing about, and let's say we're talking about in the sales process with someone. I know this go-giver thing is great, and that's fine. Focus on them, not on the money, and so forth. But, I need the money right now, okay? And so, it's one thing. After I'm successful and have a lot of money, then I'll do this go-giver focus on them. But right now, I need the money. So let's take that, and again, as I like to say, let's question our premises and see what that really is all about and what the results of it would then be. And so, let's say I'm the salesperson, and you're the prospect, and I have a product or a service that you're interested in, so I'm doing my presentation, what have you. Now, I need the money, and I can't really focus on you. This is about me and getting money because I need it to eat. I mean, and so what I do is I go in there. And yeah, I mean, I ask you questions because I know it's part of the sales process, but I'm not really listening because I'm that interested as much as I'm listening because I know I have to in order to get the information so that I can kind of sharp angle you into buying and so forth. And it doesn't come right out, but I think people can kind of sense that. And when you have a question or an objection, I'm a little bit defensive, a little bit impatient because this objection, which is just silly anyway, is kind of keeping, the money from coming into my pocket. Why are you being so difficult? And I'm not saying that, but I mean, I think it kind of comes through. And then I'm, closing a bit too early and a bit too aggressively. And I have that kind of commission breath because you can tell that I really, now my question would be, are you more likely or less likely to buy from me right now? And I think most people would say probably less likely. The trust isn't really there. You know that I'm really more interested in the money than I am in serving you. So now I'm the same person, okay? And I'm in the same financial position. Excuse me. I still really need the money right now. But what I'm going to do is I'm not going to deny that to myself. I'm also not going to deny human nature because as human beings, we are self-interested, okay? It's how we're built. It's how we've progressed over, or, how we've survived over the millennia by taking care of ourselves by being right. But so we're not going to deny my self-interest, but what I am going to do is I'm going to put it aside. I'm going to temporarily suspend my self-interest, just like when we go in to watch a movie and we know that it's a movie, it's not real what's happening up on the screen. We even recognize some of the people from other similar situations. We know that Bruce Willis isn't really cracking a clever joke as some terrorist points a gun at his head. That would be insane. Nobody would do that. But, in order to enjoy it and laugh at the right places and feel the emotion and feel the joy and the pain and the ethos and the hope, we what they call suspend our disbelief, right? And then when we leave the movie, then we go back to the real world again. Well, in the same way, I'm going to suspend my self-interest and I'm going to place my focus totally on you, not just because it's the right way to be, but because I know the chances are much better if I can really be genuinely focused on you. There's a much better chance you're going to be able to feel the value of doing business with me. So now I go in and I do the discovery and I ask questions patiently and I listen patiently and I listen really just to be able to really understand what it is that you need, that you want, that you desire, what your challenges are, what your opportunities are, what you would want to accomplish through my product or service. When you have questions or objections, I welcome them. I don't quickly try to answer them and overcome them. Instead, I question and we get to the root of the actual objection so that we can know really what it is, not just the manifestation of it. And so we understand and we advance the process together. And only when I truly know that I understand what you want, need, or desire, only then do I connect the benefits of my product or service with your needs, your wants, your desires. And then at the end, I simply ask you to take action on something that you've already told me that you want to do. And I do it without attachment to the results. My question would then be, are you more likely or less likely to buy from me now? And the chances are probably more likely. Now, I run through this exercise with people who, again, they don't know yet why it's in their best interest to be other interested. You know what I'm saying? Because if you just say to someone, well, it's actually more profitable for you to be focused on them. Oh, no, it's not. I need to be, right? But if we kind of go through this, and typically when I go through that, I ask them questions even more than the couple that I ask. But that's really, I think, how you help someone see it. They need to see why it's in their best interest to place the other person's interest even before their own. It's a very paradoxical statement. But once someone gets it, now they're ready to say, okay, how do I do it more effectively?
Have we got time for one last one to close it out?
One last question?
I got one, Mike.
Got one? Okay.
So we've got a whole bunch of coaches and different people on here that are pouring into kids' lives. And if I heard it correctly, your dad was a mentor to you and poured into a lot of kids' lives and had a major impact at a gym. I'll let you close it out if you like to kind of talk about your father and honor him and his impact and his other focus.
Well, thank you. He actually, after World War II, he went down to Miami Beach. He grew up in Massachusetts, just in the greater Boston area. And but he was in Miami Beach, and he actually ended up running Angelo and Chris Dundee's famous Fifth Street Fight Gym back in the I think it was the early 50s, maybe. Unless you're a boxing fan, you wouldn't know who Angelo Dundee was. But he eventually became the trainer for Muhammad Ali, Sugar Ray Leonard, and became really the dean of trainers. And a great lesson Dad, learned from Angelo was, how to bring along a fighter in a right way, in a good way. And that is that when Angelo had a new fighter, what he would do is, if his fighter was here on his worst day, he would make sure to fix him up with a fighter who was here on his best day. And so typically Angelo's fighter would win. He'd get a little better and I'd get a little more confidence. And now on his worst day, he was here, and Angelo would fix him up with a fighter who on his best day was here. And so typically his fighter would win. He'd get a little more confidence, get a little bit better now on his worst day. And so Angelo did that. And what that was really was building on your small successes. And that was always something that, that my dad always worked with me on, building on your small successes and helping others. And that was the big thing with my dad. I mean, he helped so many people build on their small successes. And so that's just, something I'm very, very grateful for. Another thing, a lesson that he had taught me that Angelo taught him was, Angelo used to say that that in boxing, where there are different weight classes, he always said a good big man. And back then, it was just men who were fighting. Now, of course, it's women also, so it would be men and women. But so please pardon that. But back then, the saying was, what Angelo used to say was, all things being equal, a good big man will always beat a good small man, because again, if they both have the same technique, the same speed, the same, then obviously a good big man's punches are going to be harder because he's bigger. Okay, so and of course, when I was doing sales, I always said, all things being equal, people will do business with and refer business to those people they know, like, and trust. And so it really came from Angelo's saying to my dad. But really what I learned from my dad was the way he treated people. And, I often say the single greatest people skill, and I believe people skills are the differentiator between the relatively successful and the stratospherically successful people. And the single greatest people skill is a genuine interest, an authentic interest in the other person, and that's really what it is. And that's what I always saw with my dad. He always genuinely cared about that other person, and people responded to him in kind. And so, so just great lessons from a great man who, I'm honored to have been his son. So thank you for asking.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for your time. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. We got a true group of go-givers here today. I appreciate each and every one of you, and very much appreciate you, Bob. Thank you so much for being generous with your time and pouring out to others. And the ripple effect, I hope, continues on and on and on. So,
well, thank you. I appreciate all of you, and wish you continued success.